let's get to our review. We are reviewing Faiyum, the 2020 game. Friedman Fries, the artist is Harold Lesky. Publisher is, how do you think you pronounce that? It's just 2F Spiel or?
Sure.
Sure.
I think it's
right. This game is for 1 to 5 players. It says 110 to 140 minutes, which is kind of like an incredibly narrow range, but might actually be accurate. It feels like the length of the game
so funny.
is the same, is pretty much the same in no matter how many players you have. All right, so Ben, this game, we are all kind of like, what would you say, like Egyptian. We're helping out the pharaoh build the city of Faiyum on kind of like a river delta, and we're going to be contributing to the building of this city. And one of the defining things about this game is that the city that we are building in the board between us is nothing that we place in the city actually belongs to any of the players. Everything is common property. You have an impact on these things, but everything actually there's no such thing as my building or my road
or my worker.
My worker, yeah, good point. Or my worker. In this game, the way you actually play the game is a little bit like Concordia in that you have a handful of cards that allow you to do a very specific action. So on your turn, you play one of these cards and you do an action. For example, you can play a farmer card where you will place a meeple on the board and you're going to get a resource, based upon what hex you placed the worker on. You can get a piece of stone, you can get a grape, you can get a wheat. Kind of like Concordia, you play your cards into your discard pile, and then suddenly you don't have any cards left anymore. You want to do something, you don't have that card anymore. Well, what do? You pick up the cards from the discard pile. That kind of like takes an entire turn. This is called an administration action. So you're playing cards
naturally.
Naturally, it's an administration action.
Naturally, it's an administration action,
which allows you to pick, get some money and to kind of pick your cards back up so that you can do certain actions again. So you can either play a card, you can pick your cards up. The third thing you can do in this game is buy more cards. There is a kind of market of more cards that you can buy, and because this is Friedman Fries, it kind of follows the same rules as Power Grid, where cards are going to flow into the game here and enter the market. The market being like, here's 4 cards that you can buy, and the one that's kind of like lowest in number or been around, lowest in number, like that's only going to cost 3 money. The most expensive one's going to cost 7. But these cards kind of like flow into the market, and based upon the number on the card, they'll go into the market in that order. So in general, like the simplest, easiest, least powerful cards are going to come into the game earliest, and the more complex, more powerful, higher scoring cards are going to come in late. But the actual order in every game is going to be unique and different. So we're playing these cards, we're building a city, we're going to get points for our contribution based upon what is on the cards.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually a very simple game conceptually. It really is that. You are building a city and you're building it via card play, and you're either going to be playing a card to build the city or help the city out or do whatever or gain resources, or you're going to buy a card, or you're going to reset your hand. That's
what you start to
basically
do. You, as you purchase new cards, you start to differentiate your, because everybody starts with the same 5 cards at the beginning.
Yes.
And then as you purchase more cards, you start to get asymmetrical in terms of what you can do. And hypothetically, you do this well, you start to put together combos. One card kind of leaning into another that's going to allow you to do certain things to the city to generate more resources or more money or generate more points.
Yeah.
As you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically, I mean, just to sort of give you an idea of what these cards do before we really dive into everything, you may have a card that lets you build roads. You may have a card that lets you build a settlement. You may have a card that lets you send a worker to a settlement and then get resources because of that. You may have a card that allows you to build a workshop. So you may have a card that may allow you to upgrade a settlement to a town. You may have a card that puts down a type of farmer that gets a special resource like a rose. A rose is a wild resource in this game.
Or a
You
fish,
might have,
yes, yeah.
or a fish, or you may have a card that lets you go to a hex and get not just one resource but two resources, or maybe so. All these cards are kind of interesting ways, and even hearing me discuss these cards, you can see how it creates a progression of this city that you're creating on this peninsula. So
And each of these has like a unique piece of wood. Like, so as you're playing these things, you're placing these different, like there's about 10
yes,
or 11 different kinds of wood that can go on to the board and has some meaning. Is like, this is what a settlement looks like. This is what a workshop looks like. These
yeah,
are roads. These are
these are
bridges.
towns, it's an expansion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are actually adding more and more wood onto this board, because in the beginning, actually, you have this big map, and the only wood that's on there are crocodiles. There's just like
Right.
there's as Trey mentioned, there's three types of hexes. It's going to be like a stone hex, a wheat hex, or a grape hex. And on all the grape and wheat hexes in the beginning of the game, they're just covered with little crocodiles, which is one of this. That's probably where I think there's the most personality in this game, with the crocodiles. I don't know why. And I'm not saying it like, oh, this game has no personality. I'm just like, that's the most. That's the crocodiles are just funny. It's funny that there's crocodiles. And we played with Jennifer's copy, which, as Tom mentioned, has googly eyes on the crocodiles, which is adorable. But it's just, I don't know why I love the idea of a sort of like nascent crocodile presence on our board.
You got to clear the swamps.
You got to clear these crocodiles. I like it tells a story. But that the crocodiles actually segues into what I want to talk about first, which is the art and presentation of this game. What did you think about it, Trey? The art and presentation.
I think it's pretty bad, actually. I like the wooden pieces and the look of the wood pieces, but otherwise, this game feels like a game from like 25 years ago, like early board gaming realm. So I think it's kind of doing itself a disservice. It's gone for a very simple, frankly crude style, but even in the simple crude style, it's kind of like deeply unimpressive. So it could have done a lot better, I think, in drawing people in. You like to imagine what an Ian O'Toole would do with a game like this. So I don't think that helps. I don't think it matters that much, but I don't think it's a positive.
I'm going to give it a yes and no to that. So yeah, it is a throwback in a way that for me, I don't think is a great throwback. But I know that Tom actually, he was like, oh my God, this is great. Like, you look at this, it looks like you're playing a game in 1998. To me, I'm like,
yeah,
I don't want to buy a car from 1998.
Yeah.
But I'm not really,
it's not
I'm not disregarding what he's feeling, because I actually think it's a totally valid thing. It might actually really give a nostalgic feeling to people. But I agree
Tom
too.
brags about not caring about art too. So this is consistent.
So he shouldn't be mad. But I do think I would have actually liked a little bit of a sharper design, because the art look is, I'm assuming it's the same artist who did Fast Laws, which is another Friedman Freeze game. And it matches Fast Laws really well, because in that game you're playing animals and you're moving all these jungle animals around. And it's there is sort of like a childlike wonder to it. And here I would have liked, I did not love the art style, but I had actually a little bit more of a problem with the wood, believe it or not.
Okay.
The crocodiles were great. The roads are fine. The roads are like those little stick things that you get in Catan.
Yeah.
But the settlements are just these red discs, and towns are these pegs you put on the disc. They don't look anything like towns or cities or anything. Like, why can't we use like Catan pieces? Why can't we use the classic little houses and the little city pieces? I know it sounds like I'm actually really like picking at like it sounds like quibbles. It sounds like I'm being such a classic internet person, being like, I can't believe they didn't use Catan pieces. But I actually think there is something to creating immersion in games, like what we were just talking about with Gingopolis.
Right.
And additionally, the game board can get very crowded. And there comes times where you might have to do things like count how many towns are on the board. And the towns look remarkably like the workers. When you
Right.
have those, there are these little vertical towns. It's an annoyance, and I feel like it was a missed opportunity to create immersion. The way the crocodiles create immersion and capture our imagination, I just would have liked to seen that. I would have liked to have seen that go all the way through to like our settlements and things like that. Not a major issue, but I think it's I get upset when I see really simple, fixable. I don't want to say mistakes, but flaws in a game. I guess you could say. I feel
Right.
like I'm coming down really hard
No,
on
no, no.
these little pieces of
That's
wood,
fine.
but
So the weight of this game, how explain to people what the weight of this game is.
oh, I think it's I would say like medium, like a solid medium. I mean, I'm really bad with weight. I think the
I
rules
think it's
are
a
really
little
easy.
lighter than that. I mean, it's an easy game to teach.
Yeah, it's an easy game to teach. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as heavy as Concordia. I think it because it's going to get compared to Concordia a lot. I don't think it's as heavy as Concordia. If that gives you a
No, yeah.
benchmark.
What I think so the two things that I think are really cool about this game is one is like the common board where you don't
Yeah,
have any of your own position on the map. Like there's we'll talk about some other games that kind of do that, but I didn't feel like I'd really seen that before, and I think that's a really interesting idea. So, and that makes this game different. Another thing, like it's nice to see the power grid market come out. Like as
yeah,
Tom said last week, why don't we see that more often? It seems to work really well. I always like markets, especially because it means like the cards don't really have to be especially well balanced because the players will balance them in the
right.
form of where they buy them in the market. So I always feel like that's a strong game design decision, and that often makes for very interesting gameplay where cards are coming out and you're wondering, will I get this? Can I wait? Sometimes you never have a chance to get the card that you wanted.
Hmm.
That's okay. And that's okay. Sometimes you can draft in order to stop somebody from getting a card that's critical to their combo. That always feels to me to be really good uh, gameplay thing. And then maybe the thing that I certainly latched onto early on in the game, and I kind of think I thought it was more important than it actually was, but I liked it, was the hand management aspect of the game. As you play cards and actions, then they go into the discard pile. When you actually take an administration action in order to pull stuff out, the default is that you only remove 3 cards. And if you want to remove more than 3 cards, you have to pay for the additional cards. So, if done properly, there's actually some decent filtering you can do of your deck by putting cards in your discard pile early on that then you will then never play again, because you start the game with very like basic low power cards and you're purchasing more powerful cards with more utility later on. Actually, like thinning your deck to keep it small so you can do your more powerful actions more often and then get money, because there's a certain amount of money you get when you do an administration if you've kept your hand small and you're not buying back lots of cards every time. That's felt like an interesting decision space to me of, what can I afford to lose my roads card right now and never come
Hmm.
back to it? Can I afford to get rid of my settlement card and never use it again? And that was interesting. And I've felt like I've devoted a lot of my mental energy towards managing my hand in these games, and I've never won. And I've seen plenty of people where I looked over and thought,
Hmm.
oh, they're doing a terrible job of managing their hands, and then they win, which
Yeah.
suggests to me that it's kind of a minor thing, that really it's about putting the combos together. And you
Yes.
shouldn't sweat the hand management part of the game.
So okay. So there's 3 bullet points in there. I would love to drill down on each one of them.
Okay, great.
So let's talk about this hand management that you just were talking about there. I think this is the signature element of Faiyum. This hand management. We talked about the board. The board is really cool that everything's communal, but I think the thing that is going to always separate this game out is that there is this unique Concordia-esque hand management feature but that you do have to, you can only call back when it's time to call back your hand, you can only call back 3 for free, and then you got to pay for the rest. That to me is a really, really smart design. I actually really love it. What I like about it is you you are when you're playing the game, you're as with most games like this, you are kind of sequencing out how you want to do actions. Like I got to do action A before I do action B before I do action C and
Right.
then D.
Yep.
So you're already creating a timeline of actions, but now you also have to sort of like cross-reference that with how you want your cards to go down into your discard pile, because a lot of times you want to play your weaker cards first because
You want to
those
bury
are the
them.
ones you might want to like leave down there that you don't want to pay
Yep.
a coin for. But then what happens though if you need to play your strong card first, right? And so that to me is like that is the selling point on this game. That is what makes it unique. That's like a really, really, really fascinating decision space. Although I am a little bit with you, which is that the first time we played, I was like, I accidentally buried that. Like you learn the hard way about like, oh no, I only have one road building card and I buried it. Oh, I got to spend my money. And it was like a really, really fun, cool experience. I felt though by the second game, it was pretty easy to manage it. Like it was
Yeah.
pretty easy to say, okay, I'll play my farmers now, and that's the last I'll see of them. And I actually did not find that there was a huge crunch with my money in terms of like, oh, I need that card. I don't have any money for it or whatever. It's like I feel like in Concordia, this is so unfair to keep comparing it to Concordia,
Right.
but you know what? Life is unfair. And Concordia, I feel like every little thing you do, if you do something wrong, it's like, oh, I need one more dollar, right? And here there are definitely moments where you need a dollar, but I did not find that while that mechanism was so cool, it was not as I don't. It's not like I'm looking for it to be punishing, but it wasn't as much of a
There wasn't as
consideration.
much there as it initially
Yeah,
kind of promised.
yeah, which is that was a little. I still really enjoy that a lot, but it was a little bit of a bummer. Be like, but there still are. Don't get me wrong. There are still moments where you are sitting there saying, do I pull this back now? How much money do I get? How much money do I not get? And if I want to buy this, like, does this set me up for cards? You still have decisions around it, but you
That
sort
was
of thought
point
that
one. What is point two?
the market. So the market is really cool. And what I like about the market is that the order in which these cards come out, I think it actually has a nice impact on the game.
Mhm.
I do feel like this game is not samey. I'm actually surprised. I feel like it would be very samey, especially because I have adopted some of the same strategies. For me,
Right.
it's not that samey because I do have to. It depends when cards come out. I've actually found that it has impacted my game, and it's cool that you can see what's coming down the line. So I think that the market has worked for me very nicely. I think and I think the card variety has been and the order in which it comes out has been good. Like I look at now, I'm going to do another Concordia comparison. Concordia has a market as well, and but those cards, there's always going to be the certain same cards that come out in the beginning, in the middle, and as a result, with Concordia, I do tend to go for the same cards. And if I'm playing with people who've never played with me before, I usually have unfettered access to them.
Right.
When I play with people who I've played with, they know what I like, which is one of the cool things about Concordia. And it happens in this game too, but
Well, there's more competition for the good cards.
yeah.
In one thing in Faiyum here is like, but the rules are simple, the mechanisms are simple, but there's at least like 50 different cards in terms of what they do. And so part of your activity in playing this game is as new cards are added to the market, you go to the glossary, which is a multi-page, addendum to the rules, and try to translate essentially the hieroglyphics on this cards of like, I
Yes.
think this means this thing, but let's go and read the English to see if we actually know that this is what the card can actually do. So you're often consulting a kind of a 4 or 5 page glossary for, what does the thief actually do when you play the thief,
Yeah, you are, especially in your first game, you will just like be your face will be in that glossary the entire game. But I'm actually surprised that now we're like 3 or 4 games in that
we know them.
We actually know it's about 60 cards or so, and we actually know a lot of those cards, which is nice. But yeah, in the beginning you're like, oh my god, I'm spending this entire game reading a pamphlet. I also, I do like the cards. I like that we often have a flop and there's a moment of, oh, awesome. Like in the beginning, it was like, oh, when you're discovering the cards, like, oh, cool, or oh, wow, that's a much better version of this. Oh, cool. And then later on, when you know the cards, when a card comes out, like, oh, that card, oh, I got to get that card. I like when a flop is exciting.
I think there are certainly some cards that I like better than others, or at least find more interesting. A lot of it is
Yes.
pretty straightforward resource grab, and a lot of them are also pretty straightforward convert resources into points.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly it. Like, this is one of those games, and what you can make this criticism of a lot of games, but like especially in the second half of the game, you're very much just concerned with getting victory points, and
Yeah.
you're just converting your resources into points via your cards. And
Mm-hmm.
can you do that? Now, there's a lot of games that do that. This is one of them. If that's okay with you, great. If you want something that's a little bit more theme driven, this can leave you a little bit cold in that you're just kind of like, chasing points for the
Yeah.
second half of the game for points' sake.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about the board
Okay.
now. I mean, we talked about the card play, unless you have other things about
No,
the card play.
is
But
this item 3 for you? Of
I don't remember what your third bullet point was. So I figured if I just
you said
talked long enough.
I talked about something. You're like, I have 3 points.
Well, I thought I feel like you made 3 points, and then I remembered 2 of them. And then I was like,
Let's
you know what?
talk
I'll
about the
just
board.
talk. And if I feel like by just by the power of just talking, I'll probably cover what I wanted to say.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the board.
Unless you had anything else to say about the cards. I mean, those were the so the thing here. By the way, we're also talking about the things right now that we like. Right, these are the things that are interesting, fascinating. I am going to probably circle back to the cards later on.
Okay.
But for right now, so the communal board is a really cool idea. I like this. I like at the end of the game when you sit back and you look and see how the board has developed. It's cool to see the
Stuff has
roads.
happened. Things have
Stuff
happened.
has happened. You can look at it and you can say, "Oh, cool! Look at this little civilization we made." It's cool to see roads and towns and just roads and towns, but still workshops. No, there's workshops too. But the workshop wood, by the way, I like. Workshop wood is just like a little L-shaped thing, but it looks like a farmhouse kind of.
Right.
That I'm totally down with. I praise for the workshop wood, but
Down with settlements. Or workshop.
I really clearly have a bone to pick with settlements and towns in this game, but I think that's cool. I also like the progression of the space over the course of the game. I like that we start off with just crocodiles and we have to clear the crocodiles, and then come some settlements and then some roads, and it just sort of starts rudimentary, and then there is a progression of architecture on the board. I think that's really cool.
It is cool. It looks like something. I think my criticism of the board, or like the failure of the promise of the shared board, is that I think we played the game last Saturday over at your house, and we kind of got to the end of the game, and we're looking at the board, and we've kind of seen the city emerge of Faiyum, and like there's a lot that's happening there. But my comment or my feeling about it was none of the board actually has any meaning at all.
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing a bunch of things that are going out there, but for the most part, there's very little actual meaning in terms of what is put out there. You play cards, and sometimes they need certain things on the board, like, hey, you can put a meeple on a disc in order to get your 3 wheat. And so that matters in that there are some of the hexes on the board become kind of like worker placement action spaces, and those can be finite before people do administration actions. But that's about the extent of the meaning in the game. Like, if I want to do certain things like build a vineyard, it has to connect to a road. But other than that, like, all of this wood you see on the board doesn't actually matter.
It does
much at all.
This is the big negative. And and there are going to be some other positives, but this is worth talking about because you talked about there, like building a workshop on a road is where you build that workshop on what road really doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter where you put it. And you build a town, and it doesn't really matter that you built a town, because it's the town exists solely so that way you can play a card later on and get
Or
points for it.
you built the
Or you
town
build a
because you
town
just got
because
points. Just gives you
you
points.
got points. But the town does not add any utility to the map that you've created.
That's right.
This is like the equivalent of just drawing a map. It's a fun activity, right? And but there's no this when you draw a picture of a map, your picture does not gain any utility when you draw a building on it. You just have added a map, a building, and it's cool, right? And you sort of just do things. And with this market that we've talked about, the market flushes, and a lot of times cards become available, and sometimes within a blink of an eye they're gone. It all
Right.
depends on how it moves. And so there may be a card that says build a town, and then there's another card that might give you an opportunity to capitalize off of that town. But if that card sort of goes away, you've just sort of built towns. You just built towns for no real reason except to get those points. Like, it doesn't,
Or a little money. Yeah.
little money, it doesn't do anything.
There,
And
yeah.
yeah,
There's no, because like I'd make this comment about a number of games sometimes. I tend to like games that actually engage in strategy. I'm not sure like it's very hard to actually do any kind of long-term planning here. You're
it's a
just
tactical game.
tactical game, but like there's a little bit of strategy in terms of like what cards do I put together in order to form a combo, but like planning what cards you're going to get, very hard to do. And I think that's part of what we're getting to with the map is very often the decisions you're making. Like, one of the great things about the game, well, the promise of the game is if I do this thing to the map on my turn, if I take this action, if I build a road, am I setting up somebody else to do something? Like, if I build a settlement, am I allowing somebody to make a bunch of points with a road action? I think that's really great.
I agree. That's
when
so fun.
when I do something, am I this is good for me, but am I actually setting Ben up? And I have found, like, when we play this game,
always a yes.
that's always a yes. Like, anything I do in the game is going to set Ben up for a bigger play, and that's a great thing about the game. I feel like that is.
I have
that
coasted off of
the
Trey's choice. Everything I have sailed to victory 3 times in a row, basically because of whatever Trey does. Anytime Trey does something, I just capitalize off of it.
Well, that's a good strategy: is see what Trey's building and then take cards that are going to capitalize on the things that Trey's building. That's legit. That is totally.
But that's actually great interaction. That's great for me to say.
Yes.
What is Trey doing? And how do I take advantage of that with my gameplay? That's actually like some of the best interaction you could get in a board game. And I agree. The fact that the game offers that promise, as you said, of like, okay, I'm going to build a settlement. Oh, but now I've just given Ben a platform to gain resources more easily, right? Like, you have to be constantly thinking about those things, and that's
the promise of the shared board, right? Like, that's what the shared board should be kind of like about.
Right. But where I think, to circle back to what we're talking about, like, none of these things do anything, because it still may seem like a kind of an abstract idea. What we're saying is we put down these farmers in the terrain and we get resources. And then maybe someone else builds a workshop. And maybe someone else plays a card where they can send a dude to a workshop and they get resources. So it's like, oh, the workshop gave them resources because they had a card. But the workshop itself does not impact the map. It's not like once a workshop is down that when I farm, my farming gets better. Or the fact that there is now a road to the settlement doesn't mean that settlements perform any better. So, like, you're adding these things in service of cards. You're usually doing this that way you have the ability to play a card better.
Yeah.
But you're not doing it. Doesn't inherently impact the map, which means the map is oddly lifeless. It's sort of like inert, right?
Mm-hmm.
The map kind of exists. It's sort of an abstraction of a worker placement game. Like, every settlement you put out there, you're essentially putting out a worker placement spot, and every workshop too. And
in the most generic sense, like super generic, like, certain cards are going to say place a guy on a red disc. That's all it is.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so those settlements are not there to bring this city to life, and it starts to hum with synergies. And in suburbia, you put down a tile, and now anytime a future tile of this type goes down, it's going to ping off effects because this is the city coming to life. This is the city. This is where placements start to matter, right? It's like,
Yep.
oh, I put this next to this, my income has gone down. Oh, because
That has
there was a
meaning. Yes.
thoughtfulness to right. But here it's like you put a workshop down because it was a space to put down a workshop, and then I can play my card.
Yeah, there happened to be a road there, so I can place down my vineyard. We were playing with Mike and Jesse. It was their first games, and I found myself at times where they're trying to make decisions about, should I build a road? Should I link things to the monument building sites? And I did not have good answers for them because I was saying like, well, certain cards are going to come out later on. They're going to benefit if there are long roads connecting a bunch of things. It was like, well, I don't have any of those cards now. So should I be linking them? And I'm like, I don't know. It depends on whether you plan to get those cards. Like because you don't know, like the Pharaoh card or whatever is going to be there later on, but you don't have any guarantee of getting it. So you don't know if you like end up building long roads. It's like, is that going to help me or hurt me? It all depends on who gets the card. And so very hard to plan. There's no strategy.
And you wind up, the first time you play, you sort of wind up in an existential morass because you're just doing things and you don't know why. It's like, I'm building a road because I have a card that says I can build a road.
And it gives me 3 points.
Why? What is this going to do for me? And it actually, guess what? It actually doesn't do anything for you, really. Like maybe if you get a card later on, it might do something for you if you get that card. But inherently, the road itself doesn't do anything. And so when they were saying, should I link it? In my mind, I'm like, yes. Because if it gives you points, at the end of the day with this game,
just
you're doing whatever you can in service of points. Right? And once you give yourself over to that, actually the game gets a little better, to be honest. I'm not, and I still have some other things I want to talk about before whether I say if it's fun or not, because that's a totally different thing. But I did find that in the first few plays, I was very, very frustrated by this disconnect of that we're building a map, but it's not really, doesn't really matter, and that like was frustrating to me. And I don't know if I've pushed past it, or there could be a variety of different things. But in our most recent play, it didn't bother me as much. But the other thing that's worth noting, when just getting back to the idea of that you're creating worker placement spots, is that this is a game that actually has no guardrails. And what I mean by that is it is up to the players to keep all the other players in check in terms of balance. Because so in our first game, Trey and I played a 2-player game, and neither of us knew what we were doing. And Trey kept building settlement after settlement after settlement, which is essentially worker placement spot after worker placement spot after worker placement spot. And I, meanwhile, collected cards that allowed me to go to settlements and collect money or resources or points. And I just kept on turning out those cards because there was never any scarcity of location for me. I could just go here, go there, go there. Those spots never filled up. Because I should also mention that when we talk about spots filling up, you send workers to the board and only one worker can be on a hex at a time. And then when you pull your cards back, you can pull some workers off the board. So that's how things like open up and close up. But since Trey and I didn't know what we were doing, Trey was not keeping me in check. He was actually creating so many opportunities for me.
I feel like I didn't have any other choices, but like this is the only way I could get money. Right. I felt very constrained. And I tend to feel constrained by a lot of games that say, rather than saying, here are the actions you can do. For example, like you kind of wanted to take a meeple and place it on that vineyard and get grapes. It's like, well, no, if you don't have that card, you can't do that. So if you don't have the card, you can't do it. So I often dislike games where I feel constrained by my cards. That would be like Dune Imperium fell into that category of like, oh, I just like, this just seems to be like restrictions that I don't enjoy on doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
Finish your point though. Sorry.
Just that like if players are not paying attention to what other players are doing and what is leading them to success, they are, you might find a situation where someone can really like just start to run away with it, and then the game feels imbalanced. And it's more like the game is.
Does the game give you the tools though to actually stop another player from doing what they want to do?
I don't know, because I think I think at different player counts.
Oh well, let's talk about player counts.
So this is really important.
Player counts.
Yeah. So the thing with player count is we played it 2, 3, and 4, right? Yep. The first game we played was 2. And I will say that at 2 players, I think the game is actually not a good game. I think it's a bad game at 2 players. Um, it started off interesting, and then it kind of just it felt a little lifeless. And on top of that, I somewhere in the middle, I found a combo that worked for me, and I spent an hour playing the same 4 cards over and over and over again. It just was a
Yeah,
dull. I was winning. It was cool that I was winning,
it worked.
but I was
It
but I
worked.
just was playing the same cards over and over and over again. There was nothing exciting happening with the map because the map didn't really mean anything. So I was like, "Oh wow, this was I don't know why this game is being so well received. This was it was a pretty dull experience for me at 2."
What we have found, like, because we've now played two, I've played 2 3s, and I've played a 4, is that I like the game much better at higher player counts.
Yeah.
I would expect that trend to continue. One of the kind of interesting quirks about the game is kind of like, because you're working your way through the deck, it kind of seems to me that regardless of the player count, the game's kind of going to be the same length. There's a little bit of differences in terms of like how many cards get cleared out of the market at every administration, but
Mhm.
um, this is not one of those games where 2 player is remarkably shorter than a 4 player game, and that's actually to its strength. And it did seem more interactive and interesting at higher player counts. I
Yeah.
have liked the game more the more I have played it, but I have also played it with more player counts as I've played it more often.
Yeah. So the 3-player games we played with Paul, and that was fun. I was like, okay, this is better. This is much better. This is now starting to fire on cylinders. I was like, this is a good game. It still had that kind of feeling like we were just playing cards just to get points. Like it didn't feel like we were, again, like what we were putting down on the map felt inconsequential beyond the fact that they were in service of these cards, right? Um, but then, so last night though, we played a 4-player game, and I legitimately had a great time. I thought it was actually super, super fun. At 4 players, suddenly this game came to life for me, and I was shocked. In my mind, I was actually kind of already being like, oh well, this game, well, whatever, you know. And I was like, I had so much fun last night. I mean, I was thinking about it afterwards. I actually had a blast. It was a fun time. There was a lot of fun table chatter going on. There's a lot of joking, a lot of commentary about the cards. Those worker placement spots, they started to fill up. There was competition for spaces. There was the card market also didn't move as quickly with 4 players. It doesn't sort of
You're only
refresh as
clearing
quickly.
1 card instead of 2 in every
Yeah,
administration.
so I think that actually cards can hang out a little bit longer, and then there's more opportunities for people to get certain cards, which then creates more competition on the board. Um, it was just I really had a great time, and I almost wish I had only played it at 4. Maybe right out of the box it had just been 4. And it's weird how the issues that all these things that we're talking about with the map for me kind of took a back seat, because I think with the increased competition for spaces, um, that started to give the map a little bit more of a purpose, right? Like things felt for me like they mattered a little bit more,
A little bit more. Yep.
because a little bit enough that it started to really fire on all cylinders for me. Really surprised. I was really surprised how much I enjoyed it. Like I was actually considering, you know, theoretically selling the game, because I always am going to sell my games and then I never sell any games. But theoretically, I was going to go on the sell
Theoretically.
shelf.
Uh-huh.
But I was like, actually, I'm going to keep this game now. Like I know who I would want to play it with. I know the player accounts. I was shocked.
This game has really worked with the members of our board game nights who maybe don't necessarily choose the heaviest games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think people tend to have a pretty decent first game experience with the game. I think both Jesse and Mike liked
Jesse
it.
loved it.
Yeah, and he didn't do especially well playing it. I'm just saying that as in terms of like, that's a testament. Like, when you don't do well, like, I
And
like
you love
better
it.
games better when I win, obviously.
Yeah.
But if I lose the game and still think, oh, that was really great, that's a really great sign. And that seemed to be Jesse's attitude at the end. So this feels like a good pick for the lighter side
Yeah.
of
It's a really good
Euros.
family game too, I think. Or like for teenagers. But Also, one thing that I really want to point out about last night's game is that it had a nail-biting conclusion. It was actually a great finale to a board game,
Yeah.
and you even said you're like, "Oh, we should talk about this." The
Talk
way
about
this
the
game
ending.
ends
Yeah.
is significant. Is actually really fun.
Well, do you want to explain that how that kind of works?
Sure. So as you get towards the bottom of there's like two draw piles. There's like the main draw pile, and when you exhaust that, there's like 12 more cards that are like the final turns. And in the final turns, there are 4 natural disasters that come up that go into the market. And when the 4th natural disaster is drawn, you can no longer do an administration action, which means that you basically can't reset your hand. So whatever you have, that's what you can work
The end
with.
of the game has been triggered. The game is
Yes.
not over, but the end has been triggered at this point.
So you can still buy cards, you can still play cards, but once you're done with your cards, once your hand's done, you're done. And then once you're done, or once you decide you're done,
To
you can
pass
say,
and
"I
exit
pass."
the game. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be like, "I'm done." And these natural disasters have decreasing point values on them. So the first person to pass gets the highest value points, like the 10-point natural disaster, right? That gets added onto their score. And in a 4-player game, it goes 10, 6, 3, and then 0. So the last person to pass gets no points. And so as the natural disasters come out, there's a very exciting moment of when you want to do an administration. You want to have a full reset because you want to have as many cards as possible before the end game is triggered, because you need to do that, especially if you find that you have found your combo of cards. And I want to make a really quick detour here. So we're gonna put this is
Put a pin on ending.
Put a pin on the ending, everyone. I'm sorry, but I want us to talk about how I said in the 2-player game I was playing the same combo over and over again. It was really dull. Last night in the 4-player game, I was doing the same combo, but it was very exciting because people were nipping at my heels, and the question was, how long is this combo going to work for me? Yeah. So it actually was the flip side, and it worked really, really well. And I think some of the game is deciding, when do you stop going through all your cards, and when do you just sort of find those 4 or 5 cards that you're just going to start
flogging,
hitting,
Yep.
So so part of the excitement is, when do you do the administration, and when do you reset? So that's an exciting
There's tension of like, when is the game going to end, and you have a decision point of kind of like not rolling the dice, but pressing your luck of, when will this 4th disaster come out? Do I still have time to play this final card before I do my last administration?
Yeah, and sometimes it could come out right away. It happened with Paul, where he got caught with like 3 cards left, and he didn't get to do his administration, and then he was really stuck. Womp, womp, womp. So that's a fun thing there. But then once those cards do come out, as you say, it's like a game of chicken, right? Of like who's going to take that 10-point card, which could be really important.
Yeah, how many actions can I play and still get a good pass card? So you're looking around the table trying to decide how deep can I go. I ended up being the one who kind of got stuck by the disasters coming out and ending the game slightly before I was ready. So, but I still had decent cards in my hand ready to go, and I was able to do the first pass. And this was interesting because it kind of set what seemed to be a very impressive benchmark that everyone else then had to chase with the remaining cards. And the question was, can people reach that benchmark in their remaining plays?
Yeah, it's like you locked in your score. Because basically, I mean, I had started to break out. I had found a combo, and I was like getting 8 to 11 points like every single time I did my combo. And so I was starting to make a lead. And then all of a sudden, you built some crazy bridges, and all of a sudden you sprinted ahead, and then you took the 10 points, and you got up to like 80. You took the 10 points.
I was probably like over 30 points ahead of you, something.
You were like far ahead of me. And then all of a sudden, Jesse, who had been languishing because he had chosen this fish strategy, because there's this fish resource that we're still trying to even understand why it's in the game. Sort of makes sense, but I
haven't made fish work yet. Yeah,
we haven't made fish work. It's just there, and I don't know. But he then all of a sudden he came roaring back, which is classic Jesse, with some big combos, and then he came really close, and then he almost caught up with you, but then he ultimately petered out, right? So then it's like, oh gosh.
So now it's you and Mike.
So I'm there, and Mike he's like, well, I think I'm going to play this card because it seems like it'd be a nice card to play. I think I'm going to buy a stonemason now. oh, I'm gonna go. Let's get this card. It seems like a fun card. You're like, I was like, what's Mike doing? And then all of a sudden, here comes Mike. Like, oh, this is 6 points. No, this, and you're like 6 points here, and I'm just sitting there. I am like just sitting there at at whatever it was, 69 points or not even. It was 59 points. I'm sitting there, and Mike all of a sudden he's going. And then Mike's past me, and I'm like, I knew it. I shouldn't have been relying on the stupid 8 point combo. I knew it wasn't going to be strong enough to compete with those things. And then so he starts doing well, but in the meantime, I start buying. I buy this card that gives me points for money, and at that point I had built a very strong money engine, and I start converting everything to money, and everyone sees me doing this. And you were telling Mike, you got to take that final natural disaster for 3 points, and he's like, no. And so and he's like building towards this one thing with a pharaoh. And so then I put things down to block him so that way he can't do the pharaoh action effectively. And it's getting, I'm converting more and more money, knowing that I'm going to fire off this one card. And it's getting closer and closer. I finally fire off the one card, and I wind up 1 point behind TREY. I was like, but then Mike has like one more action to do, which meant that I could take that 3 point natural disaster, and that propels me 2 points ahead of TREY. So now I'm in the lead, but Mike is still making points. I'm like, wait, stop.
Stop playing cards.
Mike, this is my glory. And Mike is so sweet and lovely. He's always got a smile, and he's just getting more points. And then he just like sputtered out 1 point ahead of you, 1 point behind me. The three of us was like 82, 81, 80.
Yeah. Great ending. Great ending. Absolutely.
And it was a great ending. And I would not have won had I not blocked his pharaoh move, right? So I liked that I had.
So that's good interaction. For like some of the stuff of my complaints about the board doesn't mean anything. It still had some meaning in that all of these are kind of like generic worker placement spots. And for him to do his pharaoh, he needed town spaces, of which there were 4, but they needed to be clear of meeples or else he couldn't go to them. And I think you found a way to block the more lucrative ones. Like you didn't completely block him, but you blocked the higher scoring options for him.
But he needed to have been connecting his towns via roads earlier on. And Jesse also, he was putting out 1 million settlements. He should have been building roads as well while he was doing that. It's hard to know that the first time you play because the game it doesn't make sense why you do all these things. So you wouldn't know unless you know what cards are coming.
Then, like, we know upon what cards are going to come out later, and if you even get them, like, so you don't know if you're setting yourself up or you're setting up other people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, okay. So, do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
Faiyum.
This has been a really fascinating game to review because there's so many interesting things. There's so many shortcomings. But I ultimately have to go with whether or not it was fun because a game can have flaws and still be really fun. And I think that last night's gameplay really saved it. I thought it was a blast. I mean, I can't even believe it. I can't believe it. What a turn. But I'm going to say people should play it online. Play it online. See if you'd like it. I do recommending it with reservations. I don't recommend it below 4 players, but it plays 4 to 5 players. But I think it's a really good one. If you go to a store, if you go to Barnes & Noble someday and you see it for like $25 or $30, it's a no-brainer. Definitely get it. But I try it on TTS. It ultimately lands in a very positive place for me. I cannot believe it. What about you?
I think I'm going to definitely recommend that Game Brainers play this game because I think it has some very interesting stuff in it that kind of like everyone should experience and know about. I think it is a very interesting game in that way, and so people should sample it. But I think that most people that listen to this podcast will play this game a couple of times, and then they will set it aside. And maybe they think, oh, I could take this back out for certain audiences or whatever, but I don't think you will ever dream about playing this game. You will never be like, oh, I'm so eager to get back there and make that fish strategy work.
Yes,
that's as close as it's going to come is like, oh, I'd like to make fish strategy work sometime. I I think that the pleasures of this game will be easily digested, and then it will not have much more to offer to you. That said, I would say of the people we've played it with, maybe the exception of Paul, I don't think Paul connected with this game in his
No.
one
But it was
play
also his,
yet.
it was
But Tom
also his
really liked it.
first. Tom
Bond
loved
really
it.
liked it. Jesse really liked it. I think Mike really liked it. So I'm a
Jennifer.
little bit in the minority here. I don't know. Did Jennifer? I don't know how Jennifer.
Actually, I don't know.
If Jennifer lent her copy to Tom, that tells me she didn't love it, because she does.
That's true. She put
does,
googly eyes on the crocodiles. I feel like that's a sign of affection, but that also may just be a sign
before
of
you even
crocodiles.
really know, though. Like tricking out your game before you've
That
even
could just
played
be-
it is a thing that happens.
That's just an instinctual thing that happens when you see a wooden crocodile. You just have to put googly eyes on it. I do want to point out that I was looking on BGG to see if anyone had commented about the fish thing, about making fish work. Why are fish there?
Why are fish here? Yeah.
And in the process, I actually saw some of the things that we talked about, like a combo that gets flogged over and over again ad nauseum. People complained about that, and then I added in mine too. I actually was like, "It happened to me," but then
fish happened to me.
I was doing that, but that was before I played my 4-player version. But there were a lot of people on there who said that is something with more experience. Those situations don't. A lot of the things that we have found to be negatives, with more experience, those go away. And these are people saying, "I've played it 11 or 12 times." But to me, it's also like watching a dry drama on Netflix where I'm like, why am I watching this? And someone says, no, you got to just get through the first 10 episodes.
You
and
just
then the
have to
11th,
get
it's
through the
great.
third season.
And it's like, why? Why do I have to sit through that? So I think it's fair to say if something doesn't get you right away, I think it's fair to be like, it's not for me, because we have a limited amount of time in a lot of games. But I'm just saying this for people who might have played it a lot of times and be like, these guys are totally wrong. I hear it. I know that that's a possibility. But for right now, my gameplay journey with it, which is, again, it's already improved massively every single time. I'm not seeing all of those things.
Yeah, that's where I'm going to end it. Like, I think people should check it out. I suspect they will move on after a couple of games. There's so many great games out there now, and so many new things that I want to play. It's hard to justify multiple plays of a game, so it's not really a criticism to say this is probably not something that I'm going to, choose to play in the future. It's still a really interesting, excellent game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.